So, one quick question.
Yeah.
What do you think the greatest show on television is right now? Let me answer for you. It's Mr. Robot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you could say a lot of stuff. You could say, that one of the greatest shows that's ever been was, what's the one with the drug dealer, the old man? And
Breaking Bad.
Yeah, crap. What's the other one? The one that's on right now with the preacher and the vampire and
Preacher.
Yeah, it's crap. It's garbage. It's garbage.
There's that one with the tits and the dragons.
It's garbage.
Nobody likes those shows.
No, it's crap.
Yeah.
The best show is Mr. Robot. Let me tell you why.
Why?
Because that dude has spooky eyes.
He does. Very spooky eyes.
Mm-hmm. That's all I have to say about that.
We don't need to talk about it anymore?
I guess we could spend the next hour yammering on about it, but I've already given the main crux of the whole thing is spooky eyes, so...
But we might as well.
We're
here.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey everybody, welcome to Friday Night Rights, a podcast about storytelling. My name's Fuzz, and with me, as always, is GoJonesy.
Hey everyone.
Tonight we're going to talk about Mr. Robot, the greatest TV show in the history of mankind, with spooky eyes.
And Christian Slater.
Doesn't
Can't
go wrong.
Spooky eyes.
Yep. And Christian Slater doesn't have a bad heart like he did in that one movie.
Which movie?
That old
Gleaming
movie.
the Cube?
Yes. It was so good. It was the cubes alone in that movie were fantastic.
They gleamed.
They did.
They gleamed like crazy.
So bad it hurt my eyes.
Like Fuzz said, this is the Friday Night Rights podcast. Our home on the web is FridayNightRights.net. Our podcast feed is up there, and we started the website to start a conversation about storytelling. There's going to be much more to come in the coming weeks regarding that, blog posts, everything like that, where we delve into storytelling of different pop culture things, different techniques, different writing styles, processes, all that good stuff. That's more to come later. There'll be more announcements of that as it comes along. We also have a Facebook page, facebook.com/FNRights. We post updates there anytime we post to the site or anytime we hit the podcast feed. I think this one might be a long one tonight, so I feel like we should probably just jump right into it.
I guess.
Because
spooky eyes,
and it's good, and we need to tell everybody about it.
Yeah, it is fantastic. If you're not watching Mr. Robot, first of all, you're a fool. Second of all, if you're not watching Mr. Robot, you should be watching Mr. Robot. It's so good.
As a matter of fact, if you have not watched season 1 of Mr. Robot, pause this podcast, go watch it, and we'll wait right here.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to wait here all night.
Yeah.
For you to finish it.
Night.
Just to get the obligatory spoiler warning out of the way. There will be spoilers about season 1 of Mr. Robot. We've started season 2, but we're not really going to delve into that too much. We're going to talk about season 1. We're going to talk about the storytelling of Mr. Robot, a show that, if you couldn't tell already, we're fascinated with.
It's so good.
So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk all about it.
Let us begin. Mr. Robot is a TV show about a man named Pete Robot.
I thought his name was Ivan Robot.
I think Ivan is his middle name.
Peter Ivan Robot.
Robot, yes. And he is a Mr. He is married. There's a Mrs. Robot and Robot Jr.
Yeah.
And they get into hijinks every week for the enjoyment of the viewers. But there's also another Mr. Robot that's about a man named Elliot.
Elliot Alderson.
Elliot Alderson. Now, the thing that I like about Mr. Robot is that at first glance, it's a story about people who are trying to change the world, albeit in criminal ways, but still noble in their own right. But the crux of the story for me is about Elliot. All the F Society stuff is great. I think it's fantastic. But it's Elliot's story, his evolution as a narrator that you can't have any faith in. I mean, the amount of times that the paradigm shifts drastically in the first season is more than what you'd see in any other show over the course of, say, 8 or 9 seasons.
Yeah. And so, I mean, so early on, like, it's not evident. Early on in the first season, it's not evident that the narrator is unreliable. And that's like a concept that comes from literature. There's a million different ways to have an unreliable narrator. In Huckleberry Finn, the narrator's Huckleberry Finn. He's unreliable because he's using his worldview to narrate to you. You know, as it'll turn out, it's not the same as what we're talking about with Mr. Robot. But early on, you don't really understand it because the nail hasn't been driven in yet to tell you, hey, we don't know what's going on. The clues are all there in the beginning. Elliot is breaking the fourth wall from the beginning of the show, talking directly to the audience.
Kind of. Because from Elliot's perspective, we're a construct that he's created.
Right. It's not Ferris Bueller talking to breaking the fourth wall.
I mean, I love that the first episode is called Hello Friend. And the first thing that he says to you is hello friend.
Right.
I love that. You know, just because he's talking to you and he sets you up. But he sets you up in a way that leads you almost from the get-go to say, you know, like, what's this guy's deal? You know, the idea that he has completely eradicated the true name of this company that he's opposed to and transformed it so that even visually, when he sees their logo, he sees Evil Corp. You know, in his mind, when anyone says the name of the company, he hears Evil Corp. And, you know, that's such a tricky, kind of odd thing that happens to you, but you just accept it.
Yes.
You know, you accept it hands down. And one of the things that I do genuinely love about the show stylistically is that there's never a sunny day. It's always gray. It's not necessarily gloomy, but it's always gray. The sky is always a gunmetal color. There's always, you know, there's never any sort of ray of sunshine that approaches the storyline or the characters in it. They're all sort of existing in this weird metaphysical gray haze that is exemplified by the way that they film the episodes and the way that they choose to employ cinematic tricks and cinematography to create this kind of gloom that is both a visual part of the storytelling, but it's also an intrinsic sort of meta atmosphere that transfers throughout the entirety of the show.
Yeah. Maybe real quick we should give just a basic plot rundown. So Elliot Alderson is a hacker. He tells you that from the get-go. And then the very first scene is him taking down a guy who runs a child pornography server.
Yeah.
That's how you're introduced to the character. Then right after that, he's on the train and he says, "Hello, friend," like we just said.
Yeah.
So he addresses the audience, so to speak, or maybe we're just a construct in his head, or whatever we are to him.
Yeah, almost from the beginning, he establishes that what's real and what's not real is not necessarily important.
Right.
You know, that it's the journey that you're taking with him that is the ultimate point of this.
Right. So through the beginning of this, we get introduced to him, and he's a little neurotic. He does have crazy eyes. He thinks people are following him. They may or may not be. We don't know. And the overall plot is he works for a cybersecurity firm. He's an analyst, and he's a very talented one, being a hacker. And one of their clients is this giant conglomerate, E Corp, which he renames Evil Corp. And so then it goes about where he is recruited into this hacker contingent, and their goal is to encrypt all of the financial records that Evil Corp has. What that does...
Not initially, though, but that turns out to be what they do.
Well, is to take their data.
Yeah, because originally their whole shtick was that they were going to destroy the data.
Right.
And then they were going to melt the data down. But then when they couldn't do that, they ended up falling back on Darlene's idea, which was to encrypt the entire thing.
So that it couldn't be deciphered.
Yeah.
And essentially, everyone's debt to this gigantic conglomerate would be erased. Mm. And the world would rejoice, and it would start a revolution. We wouldn't be reliant on corporations anymore or anything like that. That's the overall story arc of the entire season.
Yeah.
A lot more stuff goes on. But I wanted to kind of give that overview of what they had. So what I wanted to talk about first was this idea of the unreliable narrator and how well they've accomplished embodying that in Elliot. Like I said from the beginning, he addresses the audience, or whatever the audience is to him. And you don't really necessarily have the notion that he's unreliable. You know he's a little bit off his rocker. Mm-hmm. You know he's paranoid. You know he's neurotic, all that stuff. But there are clues there in the beginning. And like you said just a few minutes ago, from the get-go, he introduces E Corp. And he says, but I call them Evil Corp. Mm. Throughout the entire run of the season, whenever any character on the show says E Corp, or you see E Corp, it is Evil Corp. It's completely erased. Mm-hmm. And completely changed, like it was hacked in the television show. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's kind of where we start with that narration. And from there we go into, early for me, it did not occur to me that he would be unreliable. Mm-hmm. Just because I've swept up in that underlying plot line, that whole thing, and the intrigue of him getting recruited into this hacker troop and all that. I think it didn't hit me until it's a 10-episode season. The 8th episode, his childhood best friend Angela, meets another member of the hacker troop that he just met, Darlene, and they're at a ballet class together. And they talk like they've known each other their whole lives. Mm-hmm. And they talk about Elliot like they've both known him their whole lives. And that right there was the moment in the show where I was like, well, that didn't make any damn sense at all. Mm-hmm. And that really kind of started unraveling that whole thing where, well, I don't even know if I should be believing Elliot about anything.
Yeah.
Did that hit then for you, or did it hit a little bit earlier?
For me, it was much earlier than that, when she just appeared in Elliot's apartment using a shower. And I just remember thinking to myself, they had already established that hackers have a tendency to learn lockpicking as a secondary skill, things like that. And I was fine with that because everything still made sense. She was just a very off-putting, kind of hyper-aggressive female archetype that seemed slightly caricature, that she was going to be someone that you were going to deliberately want to hate throughout the run of the series. But then when she popped up in his shower, I thought, well, this is weird. Why is she in his shower?
Right.
And then during the, what was it, 5th and 6th episodes, where they're hacking the jail, her willingness to get involved and to stay involved despite her best interest to get the hell out of that situation raised some red flags. But I had absolutely no idea what was coming.
Right.
None whatsoever.
But just the notion that there was more here than meets the eye.
Yeah, I thought that this was a situation that I knew I wasn't being told everything that I needed to know in order to make a solid analysis of what these characters' relationships were. And I was fine with that. It didn't really affect my enjoyment of the show because, a lot of people do spend a lot of time saying to themselves, doing the Game of Thrones thing where they're constantly creating theories about what's going to happen and who's going to do that, and everybody wants to be the one who had the theory that turns out to be true. And I don't give a single damn about that. I don't care. I want to enjoy the show as it was intended, week to week to week. I'm not going to put any thought process in it beyond that unless someone specifically asks, what do you think is going to happen? And then I'll try to work up some kind of an idea that seems logical at the time. And that was the thing that I enjoyed about Mr. Robot, was that it spent a lot of time giving me these impressions that there were certain characters that may or may not be real, and that there were certain situations that what you had seen happen may not have been what really happened. And the idea of the unreliable narrator sort of creeps up on you in the series in a way that is, I think, exciting, because no other show on television does something like that. The only other thing that I've ever even heard of that comes close is Fight Club, which the showrunner openly said was one of the things that caused him to write this show, and that he loved that film and that he wanted to, pay tribute to it in a way that he could.
Yeah.
And so, I don't believe for a second when anyone tells me that they figured it out.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Yeah, I don't know that I've really encountered that, but I don't know how you would have been able to. So in the 8th episode, at the end of the 8th episode, Elliot and Darlene are talking, and their plan is coming together. F Society's plan is coming together. And Elliot goes to kiss Darlene, like a romantic kiss, and she freaks out. And she says, "You forgot, didn't you? You forgot again, didn't you?" And he's just stunned looking at her. And she's like, "Who am I, Elliot?" And he's like, "You're my sister." And so right there, those clues, the shower thing, the thing with Angela and Darlene, they all come together.
Yeah.
He's schizo, or he's got some kind of memory loss thing that we don't fully understand. But you start seeing that hint of the Fight Club elements right then and there because he kind of washed something out of his mind. So now you're thinking, well, what else is going on? And then he returns to his apartment, and the ringleader of F Society, Mr. Robot, Christian Slater's character, shows up, and he is determined that Christian Slater is his dad, who he thought was dead, by looking at some photos on his computer and everything like that. And he's mad because he didn't realize that Christian Slater was his dad. He washed that out of his mind too, apparently. So Christian Slater says,
even though there were a lot of times before that, like the heroin or the morphine, not overdose, but the morphine,
kicking it,
yeah,
getting off.
Yeah,
of
where he's getting off the morphine. He calls him kiddo,
Yes.
You know, he calls him, like, he seems very paternal in certain scenes that is frankly unnatural for that character.
Right.
You know, like, the character seems to come out with a lot of heart related to Elliot at awkward times.
Yeah.
But then when it ultimately reveals what he is, you can kind of understand why.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
And then in the penultimate episode is when it's revealed that Elliot's dad is dead.
Yeah.
Christian Slater is a figment of his imagination.
Well, not necessarily. I tend to think that Christian Slater's character, Mr. Robot, is a secondary personality. That he has multiple personality
That's
disorder.
a better way to say that. Because if you go back and you rewatch the season, you'll notice times in the season where characters are interacting with Christian Slater.
Yeah.
And at every point, they're facing Elliot.
Yeah.
Christian Slater is standing in front of Elliot.
Yeah.
So they're on screen together, but Christian Slater is there in front of him. Or Elliot's off in the background right behind him.
Yeah. And more importantly, when the scenes, like the scene where Christian Slater, Mr. Robot, and Darlene get into an argument, you know that that's Elliot in hindsight.
Yes. Yes.
And what you have is a complete flip in personality types, whereas one has social anxiety, is generally speaking repressed, tries to withdraw from interaction, and then the other side of him is very aggro, is very in your face, has very little social grace in the sense of, like, he's very self-serving. Like, he can be very diplomatic when necessary, but only when it serves his needs. Otherwise, he's fairly sociopathic.
Yeah.
And it introduces that element because you know that Elliot has been functionally blacking out this entire time.
Yeah.
Because it's his own alternate personality that brings him into the group that he founded and just doesn't realize that he founded.
Right.
And sets himself up for a hack that he himself is going to stop so that he can join the group that he already created.
Right.
And in hindsight, it makes it very interesting to see what the Elliot character is capable of doing.
And just the lengths that he's going to, that he subconsciously went to keep the personalities separate.
Mm.
Like you said, that's really elaborate to just join up with this group when he set up the hack to begin with, stopped it himself, just so he could join the group that he started. Like
and left himself an in with his own crew.
Right.
So with the whole "leave me here" thing, so that he would have a reason to have a legit moral dilemma put on his person, because otherwise, why wouldn't the Mr. Robot persona have just hacked the thing and written a note, Elliot, meet me here, or Elliot, something, something. No, he gave himself a moral dilemma to leave the rootkit in place so that he could come back later and mess with it if he wanted to.
Yeah.
And then he just let it hang for his other persona with the faith that he wouldn't be able to he wouldn't be able to delete it. He would have to leave it behind to serve some weird, intricacy of his personality that we were unaware of.
Right.
And so the complexity of the show gets more and more mind-blowing as you go along.
Well, and as you analyze it, I mean, I got exhausted yesterday going through remembering all of this narration that I could point to for when we talked about it and say, this is episode 2. This is episode 1. Like, none of this stuff was apparent when it happened.
No.
But with hindsight, I mean, once you clear the film off the lens that you've been looking through, it's all clear as day.
Yeah.
But is it actually? Because we're still perceiving things through Elliot's point of view for the most part in every case.
Yeah.
And, you know, even at one point, like right after the Darlene reveal, I think it is, he's on the train and he grabs the camera, right?
Yeah.
And he starts saying, "Were you in on this?" And,
yeah.
he gets visibly angry and loud, and that's something that the character doesn't do.
Mm-hmm.
And then it cuts to commercial. You know, like, he addressed us again, and it had been a while since he'd done that.
Yeah.
And he addressed us and was wondering, hey, what did we have to do with this? And
yeah.
it's like, you know, you don't know what's what at
yeah.
that point. The end of it's so confusing.
One of the things that I loved about that camera shake thing that he did is that if you were ahead of the game, if you were ahead of the curve, he was addressing you and you were guilty. But if you were just a casual observer of the show and you hadn't thought too much ahead of it, he was punishing you. You know, he was yelling at you, you know, for not being smart enough to know. And, you know, and that's one of the things that I genuinely loved, because my favorite arc in the entire series is with the character Shayla and Elliot's relationship with her, and how at first you just sort of assume that she's some kind of, I don't know what the appropriate nomenclature would be, but, you know, she's just sort of a dirtbag drug dealer, you know, kind of character. And, you know, she ends up being murdered because of her relationship to Elliot. And what I loved was in the episode after she died, where they give you that opening scene flashback where they're out front and the moving van is there and it's playing pictures of you from The Cure, and I'm like, son of a bitch. You know, like,
I think it's Sunny in that scene actually too.
It may very well be.
I think, because when you brought that up earlier, I was like, you know what? I'm thinking that's the only scene I can remember where you see the sun shining.
Yeah, that could very well be.
Yeah.
And again, you don't know, because it's a flashback from his perspective. It may be that it was, it may be that it wasn't. But what I loved was that she explains the depth of their relationship in such simple terms, where he asks for, was it Suboxone or something like that? Some kind of drug to keep you from going over the edge on morphine.
From getting addicted to it.
Yeah, and she says that the only way that she can get it is by dealing with some psycho. But, I don't know, you might be worth some psycho. And then as soon as that scene's over with, you realize she's dead because of him.
Well, and not only there, because she started dealing with that psycho, he hacked him and got him in trouble. And that spawned a whole slew of other things. And that's ultimately why he figured out that it was Elliot, and he figured out that he was into Shayla. So he knew if he kidnapped Shayla, he could get Elliot to get him out of prison, basically. And
that's one really interesting thing, with the exception of, what's his name? Bonsoir Elliot. Tyrell. With the exception of Tyrell, everything in season 1 completes a circuit that leads into another and another and another, that all gets completed until you get to Tyrell.
Yes.
And Tyrell is the only circuit that remains uncompleted.
Which makes sense. He's a total wild card through and through in the whole season.
His presence seems extraneous.
Yes.
He's not needed except to create a complication to be overcome. But the interesting thing is that he doesn't do that.
Right.
And so his presence throughout the entirety of the first season is almost to resurrect the Patrick Bateman character type.
Yeah.
And sort of move him into the digital, age, without really going beyond that, just as a sort of cold way, slow and methodical way of introducing a character and a storyline into a storyline where he doesn't need to exist at all.
Right. Well, I mean, for all intents and purposes, he is only a nemesis, sort of.
Yeah.
But then, in the end, we think it's pretty clear that his role is much greater than what we came to imagine. Because in the end, it looks like he helped with the F Society hack somehow. So, yeah, I agree that he was kind of window dressing. Like, here's a maniac on the other side of this whole conglomerate spectrum. I think the Patrick Bateman comparison's perfect, actually. So, yeah, and I mean, Tyrell...
the only thing he didn't do is ask someone if they like Huey Lewis in the News.
Yeah.
I mean,
he didn't hack anybody up with a chainsaw, I guess, either. But
well, not, but I mean, he beat the ever-loving shit out of a homeless man. He strangled a woman to death.
Yep.
I mean, he's definitely a maniac.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that the elements of the show, that every element of the show, and that's one of the things that I kind of had been thinking about the Tyrell character, is because there is a sort of harmony between the F Society, the E Corps, or Evil Corps, all that other stuff. And then there's Tyrell, who in and of himself is literally like a virus in a computer system. And I wonder if that's intentional or if that's just me sort of extrapolating things on a meta level.
Yeah, well, and I don't think that that's beyond the realm of possibility because we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what happens to Tyrell at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're 2 episodes into season 2 at this point. We still don't know.
Yeah.
We do not know what happened to him. We know that...
we're like 4 episodes in, but...
Well, I've only watched 2.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I've only seen 2 myself. Yeah. So, but that second episode made me think of Phil Collins' Take Me Home in a whole different way. I was so blown away. I watched that scene. I watched that scene. I shit you not. I watched that scene probably 10 times.
Wow.
I just kept rewinding it and just going, there's this morbid beauty in watching this unbelievably rich person being forced to burn millions of dollars in front of people who could have benefited from that money. But the example of just burning it was like poetry.
Yeah, it was a great scene. It definitely was. And as a quick aside, since you brought up the music thing, I read this somewhere. I didn't pick this out myself, but in the end, when the hack goes off and he's in the arcade showing Tyrell around, showing him where their base of operation is, the song that's playing is a cover of the Pixies, Where Is My Mind?
Yeah.
Which was the song that was playing at the end of Fight Club when him and what was her name? Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah.
They're watching the explosions.
Yeah.
It's the same song. I never caught on to that just because it's a different version of it.
Yeah,
probably.
I caught the song, but it never dawned on me that they were the same songs playing. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so that homage thing, and I think there was some criticism about it was like Fight Club, and that might have been one of the reasons. But again, like it's a homage. It's not a
Everyone who like Fight Club, you're a moron.
Yeah.
Stop doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, like, for someone to not recognize the things that gave them the inspiration to do the amazing things that they're doing is stupid, and this idiotic idea that every cool new thing has to be completely manifest from the ether itself with no connections to anything else and no references and no inspiration from something else is so completely dumb. It makes me sick. But like, the for a show that doesn't use a lot of contemporary music, its choices when it does is so perfect for the scene. I mean, the fact that they used a Cure song, I mean, they're my favorite band in the entire world. And Pictures of You is a amazing song. But the way that they played that in the flashback with the subtext of the flashback, I was just tearing up over and over and over again, just watching it over and over again, just thinking to myself, how perfect this scene is as a sort of wish you were here, sort of moment, and it was so well done that I could not believe it. And then at the end, when they used the Pixies song, I remember thinking, God, this sounds like that Frank Black song, what the hell is this? And then, and now finding out,
Well, I had forgotten it was at the end of Fight Club, but I knew it. I knew it then and there. I'm like, what a great choice, because where is my mind? Yeah, obviously, what an excellent choice, And they are watching the buildings explode, basically. I mean, and it was a really cool. It was a really cool thing, and I agree with you. The music in the show reminds me a lot of when some off-the-wall song would pop up in an episode of The Shield. And it would always be a song you've never heard before. Or if you had, you were into kind of fringe indie music. It wasn't a real popular song. But they'd find something, and if you were into kind of that music, you'd heard it before, and you're like, I never would have thought I'd hear this song on The Shield, because this does not fit into what The Shield is. Yeah. And they just always would do this perfect musical selection. But yeah, I mean, just to maybe...
It's one of those things that just as an aside, that really makes me angry that the American system for dealing with that sort of thing is not the same as the British, where the British just have a sort of blanket deal with all of the music industry that they can use their music. Imagine how much cooler every TV show would be if every song was available for them.
Yep. They didn't have to spend a fortune on it.
Yeah.
And what's amazing too is you'll get shows that come out on DVD and they won't have the same tracks because they have to pay extra for that.
Yeah.
It's been going on a long time. It is crazy though. Yeah. That is nuts. Kind of to put a bow on the unreliable narrator thing. This is I can't say that I've paid an awful lot of attention to it. I've been kind of a little bit infatuated with it in the last 4 or 5 years. The Huckleberry Finn thing. Mm-hmm. Like, did you read that in the 8th grade?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't really think about it then.
No, why would you?
That's exactly what it is. And you get any kind of story that is narrated has an unreliable narrator. I mean, almost across the board. You can't ever have a first-person perspective not be somewhat unreliable. Mm-hmm. So, but the way that Mr. Robot goes about it is really unorthodox because Elliot's not telling you everything.
No.
It's not novelized. And there's a lot of scenes that he's not involved in. And we don't know if those scenes are reliable or not. Like, there's this whole arc for Angela where essentially she's going the exact opposite direction that Elliot is. Like, it's synergistic completely. She is going towards the company she hates to try to change it from within, she says. He's trying to change it from without and create social change. And they go, that story arc picks up about the middle of the season and they start diverging away from each other. And they're childhood best friends. You kind of feel like Elliot's got a little bit of a love thing for her, like maybe more than just a friendly love thing, But, like, when you see her scenes and her story, there's no reason to think that it's unreliable. But in the end, with the conclusion, you have no idea.
Yeah.
You don't know what's real and what's not. You have no clue. What's up or down, nothing. Because everything you can go back and think about was not as it seemed. And I think that they just did such a cool job with it. Fight Club did a great job with it, and it's been a few years since I've watched the movie. They did a great job with it. Going back and watching it, I picked out a bunch of scenes where I was like, crazy. But I don't think it was nearly as thorough as what this was.
No.
Like, it was, it was just masterfully done.
Yeah.
Set up.
I agree. I think that one of the core things about an unreliable narrator, what it ultimately needs to boil down to from the storytelling perspective, is no matter how unreliable is he moving the story forward, Obviously, yes. And even though you can't necessarily trust everything that you see to be the truth, just judging by the sort of intricate dance of all of these plot lines coming together at the end, you can't help but know that even though you're in an unreliable story, that you are being taken care of.
Right.
You know, and I think that that's one of the great things about the way that they're perceived, or that they're doing this show, is that you know you can't trust it, but you also know that you're in good hands.
Yes.
And that makes it so much more fun. And it's the way that they do it, that sort of deft sort of maneuvering that they employ to put the situations and scenes and plot lines and storylines where they all need to be so that it achieves this very specific goal is just, it's unparalleled. I've never seen anything like it in television ever. You know, like whenever people say, well, what's it like? I can't give you anything that it's like.
I don't know. I don't ever know what to tell people either. Like, the only thing I can ever go back to is Breaking Bad, because there's all kinds of contextual things going on in that show. And it's a really well-told story. But it's nothing like Mr. Robot.
No.
Like, not at all. I'm just bringing that up because it's a really good show.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I'm saying it as a comparison.
Yeah, one of the tough things that I kind of have when it comes to trying to relate the show to people is that people literally will bring up Breaking Bad. And I have nothing bad to say about Breaking Bad. I thought that as a whole, it was a good series. It was, to me, the origin story of a supervillain. You know, but like when it was all said and done, did it necessarily change the face of television? Maybe behind the scenes, you know, but we're not seeing a slew of looky-likeys and rip-offs. You know, we're not seeing, like, if you remember when Battlestar Galactica came out, within a year, every other show that needed something done in space was doing their space stuff exactly like Battlestar Galactica. When The Matrix came out, everyone was putting their girls in tight leather or tight, you know, and everyone was bullet timing.
Yeah.
You know, like those are the things that change the face of how you tell stories.
Well, I think that what Breaking Bad might have done for storytelling, the arcs in a season and the overall story arc of a whole series, is probably a little bit more revolutionary than it's a behind the scenes thing. Yes, I think that's kind of a meta thing, and the way you tell your story on television, not people are borrowing elements from the actual show. Yeah, because I mean, honestly, that show's pretty bleak. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing. You know, there's not a lot of jokes in it.
Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, like when you see the first scene, you know that this is the best that you're going to get.
Yeah, and he's got cancer. Yeah. And it's the best it's going to get.
Yeah. You know, and from here on out, it's just shit.
Yep.
Just one shit sandwich
miles
after
of
another.
it. Yeah, you're right. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about was, it might get a little bit technical filmmaking, a little bit too much, but the way that they frame shots on the show a lot really has had me obsessed with it for a couple of weeks. I know I brought it up to you. And yeah, this isn't, we don't really talk about film techniques or anything, but there's something deliberate, in my opinion, about the storytelling, about how they are portraying or how they are framing subjects on the show. Mm-hmm. So what they'll do is they'll put a subject in a shot, like what's supposed to be a close-up shot. Yeah. And they'll frame it so that the subject is just the small portion in the lower right or lower left-hand side of the screen, and there's all this headspace above them where you can see, if it's outside, you can see the landscape more. You can see more of New York City, or if they're inside, you just see the wall behind them and the surrounding room and the set piece. And they do it so much that I was like, this can't just be like a artistic decision. There's got to be a storytelling aspect to this. Mm-hmm. And doing a little bit of research into it, I really jumped down a rabbit hole where I got into this thing where it's talking about quadrants on a screen where they'll tell different stories on different sides of the screens or different halves of the screens in the same shot. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that that's necessarily what's going on here. So what I kind of came up with is that bleakness that you talked about earlier, with it being gray a lot and all that. Like, the subjects are made to look small in this wide world, right? Where maybe the theme is that they're insignificant, and especially up against a giant conglomerate corporation like they are, it's always them being small in the frame. It even happens with Tyrell, as he's a part of the scene, or he's a part of the conglomerate, but they do a lot of things where there's submissive looks that are framed where someone's standing over somebody else. But it's just really interesting. And one of the other things that they do a lot of is two characters are talking. Traditionally, you'll get an over-the-shoulder shot of one of the characters, right into the face of the other one. In this, they'll have two characters facing each other, and the camera will be off to the side. And it'll film a close-up of one subject as they talk, and then it'll switch and film a close-up of the other one as they talk. So it's a back-and-forth conversation, but then they can frame them small down in the bottom left or right-hand corner, respectively. And I just, going through it, I was like, I don't see this enough. You know, I really like this. I think it looks different. I think it looks neat. What are they trying to say here? Mm-hmm. And that was the best thing I could come up with, is that it kind of feels like it gives me this like sense of inadequacy, or like this almost like agoraphobia sense, like this wide open space, and I almost feel like claustrophobic or agoraphobic because of it. Like, it kind of adds tension to the scene to me. Yeah. And I think that, like, as a storytelling, as an aspect of storytelling, it's really interesting that they've done that. And is that what they're trying to convey? Where these people are insignificant, or, as one, they are small, but, as in larger numbers, yes, they can do more, type of thing. Did you notice that before I brought it up, or?
Before, I hadn't thought too much about it until you brought it up, but I had noticed that it had a very comic booky kind of feel to the way that the cinematography was working. They were using a lot of interesting mechanisms that you really don't see in television or film, but you do see it a lot in sequential art. And a lot of those kinds of techniques are designed for the express purpose of creating an emotional reaction without using words or without using music. So, and we had talked about this before, Kubrick was notorious for using oddball shots to create emotional breaks in what was happening. David Fincher is another one who's really good at doing that, using the film itself as a mechanism to create an emotional response rather than having to rely on dialogue or acting or music. And to me, it's not that crazy because I have read and studied so many different forms of sequential art that the idea of using a forced perspective or a break between the foreground and the background, or utilizing close-ups versus full body shots during conversations. When you do things like that, you are psychologically implying depth to what's being said. So that, for example, if you see a scene where for whatever reason the camera is focused so close that all you see are the lips of a character moving, then it's implied that whatever it is that's being said is of the utmost importance. But when you break a character away from the background by placing them in a position where they're not center frame or just off center frame, then what you're doing is you're creating a sense of insignificance. You're creating a sense that they're a part of the scene rather than
the subject.
Yeah, rather than the main thing that you should be looking at. And there's a lot of theory that goes behind that, especially in film. But it's a relatively new thing that you're starting to see, where people are using legit comic book style art to portray film and television. Comics have been doing this stuff for years.
Yeah.
And you just get used to it.
And I mean, it shouldn't be surprising. A comic book is a storyboard.
Yeah.
So it's just a wonder that it's taken this long. Like,
yeah, it could be said because using those kinds of techniques are pretty artsy.
Yeah. Kind of unorthodox.
Yeah, and it doesn't really necessarily lend itself towards easy storytelling. Take any TV show that's on today, and most conversations are, like you said, over shoulder coverage, change positions, over the shoulder coverage, send it into editing, we're good to go. And you just flip it back and forth and you're fine. But to go through and have some of the scenes that they've had where you have these close-ups, or you get that classic Elliot half his face on screen, these kinds of things are for comic book fans, these are old hat. This is all stuff that we've seen for decades. The idea that they're now starting to use it in film is disappointing, because they've stolen everything from us. But you just kind of have to accept that some of these guys, like Sam
Esmail,
I think so, is obviously, as a creator, is a guy who is willing to force feed new concepts and new ideas into what he's doing, and he's not really opposed to making the audience catch up, which is almost always universally the reverse.
Right.
Most television is there to sort of spoon feed you concepts and ideas, and then march you right into where you need to be happily, and make sure that there's plenty of narrative for you along the way, because they don't want you to feel dumb.
Yeah.
But Mr. Robot's not like that. And
no, it always feels like they're holding all the cards.
Yeah, and it's not that they're they're not dickish about it.
No.
Well,
it's it's delightful. I mean, you don't necessarily get to experience stories that way anymore, because our minds work where if we're presented a mystery, more often than not, we're going to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it's no different in Mr. Robot, but once you think you figured something out, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately. It's like they're telegraphing it. They're telegraphing what you're going to be thinking.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do they do that? There's so many different types of viewers and everything like that. It's insane. Yeah. I mean, it's really a great show.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. I think that a lot of the core concepts of the show are revolutionary enough, because this show isn't about tackling a bad guy. It's not about stopping a terrorist. This is the first show that I've ever seen on television that is about complete and total revolution. They're clever enough to leave the government out of the equation
for the first season.
Yeah. And that was a smart move, because people could have construed that this show was intended to be something that it wasn't, something maybe even sinister. But instead, by using a corporation, a global conglomerate corporation, as the target, what you get to see is a show where there is no hero. There's no Jack Bauer in this situation. This is the bad guys at work, and they're attacking the foundation of what our world is based on. And when they succeed, you're elated. And that's, to me, that's incredible. You know, because if this were to happen in real life and, you know, you couldn't access your ATM for a week, you'd be pissed.
Yeah.
You know, revolution be damned. You'd be like, I can't, you know, get
do anything.
A cup of coffee. I can't do shit.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I'd take that for a week if I was absolved of all my debt.
Yeah. You know, but you would still have to say to yourself, though, that, you know, the inconvenience would be incredible. And, you know...
I think that's one of the ideas, though. Like, the burning the money in front of all those people.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need this stuff. You know, we don't need these corporations, these giant conglomerates that control everything. And yeah, it's going to be inconvenient to go to a different way of life, but you won't have any debt anymore. Mm. You know, what's yours is yours, basically. And I think that that's kind of an idea with that. With the revolution they're starting, yes, this is going to be inconvenient.
Yeah.
But
one of the only things that does kind of confuse me, though, is why didn't each one of those F Society people go out and buy a Tesla the day before they decided to annihilate the global economy and to get rid of debt, so that they could just be like, oops. Well, if I got a car for no money
I
down.
got this $80,000 automobile.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah, they should have done that. Instead, they let all those dogs out of that dog pound.
Yeah, I mean,
which was great. Yeah, I don't think we've said enough good things about Mr. Robot. And I'll say this as an exercise in educating yourself about storytelling and all of the different ways that stories are told. I don't think you can do too much better as far as schooling.
No. If
you go through, watch season 1 and enjoy it. And then if you have the time, watch it again and deconstruct it, because it's incredible. I rarely go back and watch seasons like I did that. I mean, just like I said, the education alone, just in storytelling and something that I care a lot about, just blew my mind.
Yeah.
This whole framing thing, you know, the idea of a framed story and an unreliable narrator and all this stuff, I never would have dove this deep on if it hadn't been for this show.
Yeah.
And it's, if you have the time, you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, I've seen the first season beginning to end 8 times. And part of that is because I have too much time on my hands. But part of that is because the show is so good. And it's not just the framing or just the unreliable narrator. Every actor in it brings their A game. The storyline is just riveting. You get behind it.
I can't think of one scene that doesn't belong, that doesn't serve some purpose. I can't think of an episode that's a throwaway episode. You get that on like every television show you watch. I mean, even this last season of Game of Thrones, which was one of their best. I mean, there was scenes in there you didn't need.
Yeah.
They could have done away with
a
lot of stuff. But this thing, beginning to end, is rock solid. I can't think of anything I could do without.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've talked them up with all of our followers. I'm sure that they'll be sending us a check for all this promotion we've been.
3,000.
Yeah. Oh, it's 30 now.
30 now. Yeah.
It's been a whole week.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, you got any other thoughts on Mr. Robot?
Really, the only couple things that I would add is that, you know, this and True Detective, which I think is another show that's season 1. I think we should do one of these on that. But this is literally a master class for writers who are just coming up, if you've got a story that you're burning to tell and you want to write a book, you want to write a short story, you want to write a script, whatever it may be, watching Mr. Robot from beginning to end and then going back and watching it again from a critical perspective will make you a better writer. It will force you into seeing things from perspectives that you're not used to looking at things from. And it gives you a sense of completion that when you go to work on your own stuff, you will subconsciously want to emulate that to make sure that you've dotted every I, you've crossed every T, you've made sure that every single one of your P's and Q's are in order so that, as a writer, you will be better at your craft for having partaken in a TV show. And I can't think of any higher praise than that. This show will make you better at what you want to do. If you're a writer and if you watch the show and you deconstruct it, you take the time out just to give a damn and watch the pacing, watch the scene where Shayla is found in the trunk, watch Elliot's reaction. Everything about the show is so eloquently done that when you go to work on your own material, you will carry it with you, and it will make you better, hands down. And if that turns out to not be true, I will give you a shiny nickel.
A shiny nickel.
A shiny nickel.
Wow. You heard it here, folks. Shiny nickels for a few people. I agree with you. I can't disagree with you whatsoever. All right, I think that about wraps it up for Mr. Robot. We sure did enjoy this episode and the last two episodes and coming back from our hiatus. We have more planned. We have more in the hopper. So stay tuned to our podcast feed on FridayNightWrites.net, our YouTube channel, youtube.com, or Friday Night Writes on YouTube. We post all of our podcasts there in video form, so you can watch them that way if you want. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/FNWrites. Any updates we have will be we'll post on there. I intend to write a companion piece to this podcast that will go up on our blog at FridayNightWrites.net. And I think that's it. We'll be back next week with, I'm not sure yet.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Have a good one.
She's the kind of girl you dream of. Dream of keeping hold of. Better forget it. Ooh, you'll regret it. She'll say that there's no one love till she finds another.